Good morning, good afternoon, good evening around the world. This is Doug Brunke, founder and CEO of Global Chamber. And we have an extra special event today because, I end up spending most of my days in California, and I've lived in Texas. And certainly these days, over the last few years, there's been a lot of conversation and a lot of activity between California and Texas. And I think it's a testimony to the professionals that we have assembled today on this Globinar, how we reached out to Barry Broome and Christine Peterson in California, and two amazing people, Maher Maso and the San Antonio Economic Development Foundation and their activities with Jenna. And nobody said, no, I don't want to participate in this activity. Everybody was just straightforward. Hey, I just want to, they didn't articulate it directly, but basically they said, indirectly, that this is a conversation they want to be part of. And recently we had Barry Broome talk to our Global Chamber chapters in Northern California, and he put together just a really articulate explanation of why California is amazing. And so I think what we're going to all walk out today with is that both Texas and California are amazing states to do business and to connect up with the world. And you can't go wrong in either state, and there's advantages and disadvantages with both depending on your business. That's what I think we're going to come out with. I could be surprised, but more than likely that's the case. I am joined on the moderator stage here with Christopher Herring, Global Chamber San Antonio, and Nelson Olavaretta, who's our Global Chamber Dallas person. I would like to start by, if you could each take 30 seconds and introduce yourself, and then we're going to flip a coin and we're going to decide who's going to go first, California or Texas. And so Nelson, this was your original idea. Thank you for coming up with this. Tell us a little bit, just a few seconds on yourself and what you're hoping maybe to get out of today.
Thank you. Well, as you know, we have seen in our area a lot of companies moving to the Dallas area. But we know that California is still thriving, is still a place to do business. So we wanted to contrast in an event, just people from both sides in this arena of relocation to share what they see is the advantages of either state, have a friendly conversation. And like you said, everybody was eager to jump in. So I thank very much, especially Mr. Maso for accepting my invitation, and the rest of the panel for accepting to be here. So happy to be in this talk, and thank you very much.
Thank you from Dallas, Nelson. Christopher, how about you? You've done some really great work there in San Antonio. You've already had Jenna speak, and she also, similar to what Christine and Barry have done in California, has so eloquently articulated why someone would want to locate not just in San Antonio, but in Texas. Thank you for joining and leading today.
Thank you, Doug. I'm so excited about today's event. I happen to have lived in both California, in Los Angeles, and in Texas, in San Antonio, and I know that both markets are simply wonderful. I oftentimes I'll think about the wine in California, because California is known for their wines, but we also have an amazing hill country in Texas. And so for the wine connoisseurs, you won't lose anything by being in either state. I do know that the housing markets in both economies are pretty much booming at this point. Everyone's trying to buy homes, but I'm really super excited about the prospects of having the new Silicon Valley in Texas. Austin was cited by Forbes magazine as being a possible hub for this new Silicon Valley, as well as where Nelson is in Dallas. And so that's pretty exciting. I know that as Jenna from the San Antonio Economic Development Foundation does her work to create economic development, that I-35 corridor is very attractive. And so not only does she represent San Antonio, but the larger community. And so I'm just excited about seeing the experts here. I want to kind of hedge to see where I'm going to put some of my investment in the future, since both markets are simply just booming at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher. And now with the ceremonial coin toss, Nelson, Oliveretta, Christine or Barry, or who would like to call the coin in the air?
Christine, you call it.
Okay.
Okay.
Tails.
It is tails.
So what does that mean?
That California starts.
So you get to decide, would you like to go first, or would you like to go second? California first or second?
Barry, what do you think? First or second?
Well, you know, Texas won the Governor's Cup, so we should let them go first.
All right, that sounds good.
Barry's got some strategy involved here. Outstanding. Very good. Well, so then what we'll do is, what's going to happen now is we're going to have each one of the speakers, and we have two from each state. Each one are experts in their own areas. We're going to have each one, first from Texas, speak about 7 minutes each. And so that'll take us out to about 40. So we'll have about 20 minutes for Q&A. So I encourage you to store your questions, send your questions in, and we'll have question time at the end. So let's go, and I would like to suggest that we start with Jenna Saucedo-Herrera. She's the president and CEO at San Antonio Economic Development Foundation. It's called the SAEDF. She gave such an eloquent conversation and discussion last time about San Antonio, what's going on there, really extraordinary. And then she'll be followed by Maher Maso. He's principal site selection and business incentives at Ryan. In between the speakers, we're going to have Jeffrey Garza Walker of Cresa give some data, kind of as an arbiter of some data. So Jeffrey, hold on, and we'll get you in between. So Jenna, would you be able to kick us off, please? 7 minutes, then we'll go to Maher, and then we'll head over to Jeffrey. Thank you for sharing your information today. Really appreciate it.
Yes, Doug, thank you so much. I'm happy to. It was an interesting intro. It was kind of, should we kick or receive? But I like the strategy, California. Very well done. Let me just clarify, though. We didn't just win the Governor's Cup. We've won it for 10 years running. And Governor Abbott will be sure to remind you of that every time you talk to him. So clearly, we're very proud in the state of Texas, and certainly in San Antonio, Texas. But let's be clear. We brag about being the 9th largest economy in the world, and Governor Abbott will say that makes him more powerful than Putin. But California ranks a little bit higher than us still, right? So this is certainly friendly competition, and California has really had it going on, right? And the business cycle changes, productivity and GDP ebbs and flows, right? And so San Antonio and Texas primarily are certainly poised for continued growth, and we're in our prime, and we're happy to be here today. I was asked to share briefly, and I know I'm on the clock, but briefly just a little bit about San Antonio and the value proposition. And so I'm going to share slides. Hopefully that's working with the group. Can I get a thumbs up?
We got you.
Yep.
Wonderful. So this is a test on our pitch, but also a test on our technical capability. So I'm passing so far, fingers crossed. At a very high level, San Antonio, you see our value proposition here, but we're really one of the best kept secrets in the country, and our organization at the EDF is working to change that. But the value proposition is simple. We are centrally located in the country, close proximity to Mexico. So when you're thinking about operations that need to run 24-hour manufacturing operations, data centers, really all corporate headquarters, it makes sense to be located certainly in the central region. Then of course we don't have a state income tax. So I would argue that just a favorable tax environment and pro-business climate at the state level. From a talent perspective, we are very proud that we are one of the most diverse communities in the country. This is a stat specifically for the San Antonio New Braunfels MSA. We're about 56% Latino and proud of it. 70 people moved to San Antonio daily. And as you can see from a talent pipeline perspective, we have Joint Base San Antonio here, which is the largest joint base military operation in the country. And so 2,000 veterans transition out of the military annually, and 25% stay, which is a pretty good sign. They like the quality of life here. From a resiliency standpoint, we have a rich history, legacy as an economy, but we're extremely proud that we might not get the big upsides, but we certainly don't get the significant downsides. And so we're borderline, quote unquote, air quotes, recession proof, but the diversity of our industries makes us so. And then from a life perspective, you can see the stats here, you know, walkable, green spaces, UNESCO Creative City of Gastronomy and Culture. We're extremely proud of that. And our top growth industries are over to the right. And I'll talk a little bit about that here too. From an industry landscape perspective, these are the industries that we're working to grow. And I'm speaking specifically about the San Antonio region that we represent. But obviously there's a mega regional play with Central Texas. We partner very closely with Austin and also very closely with our counterparts down in Monterrey, Mexico. From a cybersecurity or information security perspective, we have the 16th Air Force, which is the Cyber and Intel Command based out of San Antonio, which obviously means we have the assets and talent to support corporations looking for regional cyber commands or even cyber headquarters here within the market. We also have NSA Texas. USAA has a significant presence of cybersecurity talent in San Antonio as well. And then the University of Texas San Antonio has a top cyber program in the country. Manufacturing, all I have to say is that Toyota's doubling down, Navistar's doubling down, Tesla's doubling down. And we all know that manufacturing has a multiplier effect. And so you see their suppliers, tier 1, tier 2, relocating to the mega region. And so that the majority of our pipeline are manufacturing and really tech manufacturing jobs that are on the high wage side. Bioscience, we have the San Antonio Partnership for Precision Therapies. And we are doing research here in San Antonio that is unmatched around the world, not just across the country. Unfortunately, what the Southwest Research Institute and Texas Biomedical Research Institute do here is highly confidential. But I'll say that SWRI, Southwest Research Institute, has flown more missions to space than NASA. And Texas Biomedical Research Institute in San Antonio tested every single COVID vaccine. That just kind of gives you scale of what we have here. And I'm going to continue to move on here. As far as momentum goes, I mentioned that we're the 9th largest economy. The state of Texas is the 9th largest economy in the world. We've been designated as the fastest growing population, #1 destination for corporate relocations. It is truly our time in the state of Texas. So Oracle, Jacobs, Toyota, Uber, Tesla, you name it. Specifically for San Antonio, we've had companies out of California, actually, Tasca, Safe Ride. We have a few in the pipeline today, Hulu's another one. My goal is not necessarily headquarters relocations. What I'd like to see are these companies investing in other markets. And if we can keep them here in the United States, that's a win for every single community across the country. Hulu's an example of that specifically.
And Jenna?
Yes.
And Jenna, you have about a minute.
Perfect. Cost. I'll just let you guys let this sink in. So this is the comparison here between San Francisco specifically and San Antonio. Basically 70% less for a home, and everything else is about the exact same. And with that, I will close.
Fantastic. Great way to start it. Great information. I'm sure you've got probably some backup slides for the Q&A and other information as well. So great way to kick it off. Let's go over to Mayor Maso. Mayor, thank you for joining us today. And what would you like to share?
Well, thanks for having us. And following up Jenna is going to be difficult. She gave you a lot of facts and figures. So I'll keep it very generic for the first 7 minutes. As you mentioned, I'm a principal with Site Selection and Business Incentives, and we do business all over the country, including California. We do 97% of the Dow Jones Industrial Average as clients, and dealing over 50 clients are over 50 countries, and we are about 3,000 employees. So we have a really good pulse of the business world. And first and foremost, I'm a recovering elected official. So I'm still on the 12-step program, still working through that. Don't hold that against me. 7 minutes in my world used to mean 30. So I'm still working on that as best as I can. You know, Texas is a very vibrant place. The best I would tell you is a few years ago, I spoke at the British American Business Council in London. And, you know, I asked them how many people know where Texas is. And even our friends in London didn't necessarily know where Texas was. And those that did, they really had no clue what Texas really was about. Most of them had pictures of farmland and oil, right? That's what they thought Texas was. Or they know the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders, right? Which are, their home is in Frisco, by the way, where I live. But much more than that, they didn't really understand the business climate. Texas does have those things, but it also has healthcare, technology, financial services. But put it to them this way: if you take 4 UKs, you can put them inside of Texas. And so that really opened their eyes about how big and diverse the state is. And that's what makes it unique. And it's obviously Texas is very business-friendly growth. But the big theme, and Jenna touched on it a little bit, is really hyper-growth. It's the growth out here. And I'm going to put it in my city's terms, where I was mayor for 9 years, Frisco, Texas. Very similar in North Texas and throughout Texas. I moved to Frisco in 1992. In 1996, there was 6 schools in the school district. I became mayor in 2008. In the year 2010, the US Census, Frisco was a population of 33,000 people. I'm sorry, 33,000 people. 2010, it was 116,000. Fastest growing city in the US. Today, it's over 205,000. Basically 2,000 to 2,500 new homes every year. But the school district, if you think about it, the youth, the workforce, they had 6 schools in 96. They have 75 today. 72 open, 3 more under construction, averaging 3 schools per year open. So it's a very young community. And you see that throughout Texas. You know, the consistent theme out there is Texas makes up approximately 8.9% of the US population, but 32.4% of the total growth between 2019 and 2020. We had more population than any other state, and we do it at a very fast rate. You know, the DFW area where I'm at, we call the Dallas-Fort Worth area, which is North Texas. In the year 2000, it was 5.2 million people. 2010, it was 6.4 million. 2020, the estimated census that comes out is about 7.7 million. And the estimates for 2040 is 10.2 million. We added just in jobs alone between July 1st, 2019 and April 1st, 2020, 1.2 million people. So over the last 10 years, 950,000 new jobs, and still growing. So it's, you know, it's a great community, but first and foremost, we're all Americans, right? We're all here. We actually support each other. Each state has its own unique things that they provide. But in Texas, the position here, and I actually was appointed by the governor a few years ago with a group of 11 others on a committee called the Select Committee on Economic Development. We're always looking at new ways to bring businesses and jobs to Texas. We're always listening to our businesses and figuring out what their needs are. We all know the world has changed drastically. And because of the fast growth, we're able to reinvent things. In our city, in Frisco, for example, you can drive along a major roadway with a new Audi, and they'll tell you what speed to do to hit every green light. The first ever Uber Elevate, the personal transportation through Hillwood and Uber will be focused in Frisco. So we're always looking at innovative ways. What does a new city? You know, we use the dynamic smart cities. What does that really mean? Well, we're trying to create those in cooperation and in partnership with the business community. So with that, first time ever, I'm going to stop early, I think. What, I have 10 seconds left or something like that, but I'm going to hand the ball back to you all.
Thank you, Mayor. Outstanding. Thank you for keeping right on time as well. The bridge between Texas and California, we're going to fill with an expert. We had a couple experts that we could pull from. One of our favorite people to work with almost on a daily basis is Jeff Pappas of ESRP, based in Dallas. He was part of our recent International State of the Metro there in Dallas. And one of the things we love working with Jeff on is their reach internationally their ability on the commercial real estate side, not just to help in Texas, but for instance, they've been helping with call center comparisons between Texas and Brazil and on other places. And so we really appreciate Jeff. I know you're on the call as a viewer today, and next time we'll have you as a speaker. The speaking side on the commercial real estate for today is my good friend and the king of real estate in Phoenix, Jeffrey Garza Walker. He's with Cressa Phoenix. And Jeffrey is also one of those globally connected fellows who helps us quite a bit in Latin, or helps members of ours in Latin America and other places. If you don't find him on the golf course on Friday morning, you'll find him working away, giving members all that they can handle in terms of information to make the right decisions with their commercial real estate. And today he's an arbiter for us in terms of sharing some specific data between Texas and California. And I believe there might be a little of information about Arizona. So Jeff, could you take a couple minutes and give us some information?
Sure. And then Doug, were you going to pull up the slide for me?
I don't have it. No.
All right. Don't worry, I can talk to it, but great to be here today. And yes, I will be an arbiter for you. And I'm actually working with Nelson on we're going to be meeting on an opportunity down in Mexico, as a matter of fact. So been working through the Global Chamber. But Doug had asked me to add a little flavor from an Arizona perspective, just to keep you guys honest in the room. And I actually tapped some resources. I don't know if Barry's heard of an organization called GPEC, Greater Phoenix Economic Council. I think you ran it before you headed off to California. Mm-hmm. But I tapped their shoulder and got some interesting factoids for you. But what we've been able to determine is that the net flows from California to Arizona and Texas are positive over the past 10 years. So meaning that more people are leaving California to go to Texas than the reverse of that. So that has been unbiasedly confirmed. Also, the net flows from California to Arizona have quickly risen over the past decade, from 10,000 to over 30,000 per year. So I think we might be seeing an epidemic of people leaving California, but I wouldn't panic yet, people. There's still plenty of population there for you. And then the net flows from California to Texas were 20 to 30,000 per year until 2017. But now that activity has jumped to 40 to 50,000 per year are going to Texas from California. And the inflows and outflows from Arizona and Texas have remained relatively steady over the past decade, although Arizona has picked up a little bit more from Texas. So since 2015, we have had about 73,000 come from positive inflow from Texas to Arizona. And that is stuff that we've been able to verify. And I think the one thing that I would just simply leave you with is that in the great state of Arizona, there's one thing that neither California nor Texas can offer either one of you, which is disaster proof economy. Number one, in fact, is Texas, who has the most cost per millions. In fact, I think there was a freeze last year that affected some of the companies in your state, if I'm not correct. And California, goodness gracious, you're about to slide off the end of the earth with some of those tectonic plates. So in Arizona, we have sun, and more sun. So if you want to come where it's hot, where the sun is rising, the Valley of the Sun stands here as a neutral partner right in between these two behemoths of California and Texas. And I thank you for your time.
I retract my description of Jeffrey as impartial that I mentioned earlier. And we do have the slide, Cesar. I sent that slide. Maybe after the California presentation, we can show that. So sorry, Jeff, I thought I misunderstood. So we do have that information, and it is really good to see. So thank you for your very partial toward Arizona conversation. However, the point of it is that there has been fairly constant migration out of California for many, many years. And I think this is the thing that Barry really impacted me when Barry mentioned this a few weeks ago, that they're not just, surviving it, they're thriving it. And so let's go now to Christine Peterson. She's the Director of International Trade and Investment at the Mayor's Office in the city of Los Angeles. So she works closely with Mayor Garcetti and the leadership team there in the city of Los Angeles. And she's very well connected into what I think, or at least my own perception is probably the most international city, or feels like it, that we work with. You know, London is very international. Tokyo certainly is. And there are many other international big cities. New York, I'm from New York, so believe me, yes, New York is too, but LA is monstrously international. And Christine, you look over international trade for LA and you're so well connected there. So thank you for sharing your information today. We look forward to hearing now the California counterpoint. You're welcome. I'll just go ahead and start my timer here to keep to the 7 minutes. Thanks for having me. As you mentioned, I work in the Mayor's Office of International Affairs. We're lucky to have an Office of International Affairs. And so most of my focus today will be on attracting international investment to the United States, to California and Los Angeles, and why international companies are choosing Los Angeles. As you've already heard, California is the largest economy in the US and the 5th largest in the world. But Los Angeles alone is the 3rd largest metropolitan economy in the world. So recently surpassed $1 trillion, and it would be the 17th largest economy in the world if it was compared to countries. And our strength in Los Angeles and California really comes from our diversity in terms of our people, as well as our economy and our industries. We are a leader in everything from agriculture to entertainment to technology. Los Angeles, of course, is known as the entertainment and creative capital of the world, but we're also the historic home of aerospace and innovation and the largest hub of manufacturing in the country. So our key sectors that we're focused on within the city are tech, including biotech and clean tech, new media and entertainment like esports, AR, VR. 3rd is space and aerospace. 4th is mobility. Think electric vehicles, micromobility, autonomous vehicles, even urban aerial mobility. And 5th is manufacturing 4.0. And across all these areas, we really have a focus on sustainability and social impact. So just a question that might be on people's minds is how the LA and California economy is doing right now. LA County has a history of contributing more to the US GDP than any other county in the country. And California is very resilient because of our size and our diversity. So in 2020, the state's real GDP contracted by about 2.8%, which was better than most states. And we're expected to recover faster than the United States as a whole and see near record growth in 2021. California continues to be a top destination for foreign direct investment. We have the 3rd highest rate of new entrepreneurs in the country and successful entrepreneurs. And I'd say the top 10 reasons that companies are choosing Los Angeles are our workforce and talent, our diversity, our creative culture, our accessibility, funding access, global connectivity, our innovative ecosystem, the quality of life. We are a hub for environmental, social governance focused companies, companies that have ESG in mind. And because we are, as a representative of the local government, I like to focus on our willingness to partner with companies from all across the globe. So just few key points on each of these areas. On workforce and talent, California, we have the most top 50 universities in the United States, with 10 universities in the US News and World Report rankings. And California also, Los Angeles County graduates more engineers than any other county in the country. So we have a really diverse and deep talent pool. In terms of our people, you can come to LA and feel like an Angelino almost immediately. There's really no one type here. We have people and cultures from around the world. 27% of Californians are foreign born,
and 44% of Californians speak a language other than English at home. In LA, we have about 30% of Angelenos that are foreign born, and nearly 60% speak a non-English language. So more than 140 countries are represented here, with more than 220 different languages spoken on our streets. Of course, our creative culture, we have a really interesting kind of DIY culture in LA, and a horizontality and intersectionality that blurs and crosses borders. So you have creative people working with the health technology sector, working with, you know, ad tech. So the collisions and the combinations of industries, I think, is very unique to LA, and something that opens up a lot of possibilities. And then people are also choosing LA because we're very collaborative. It doesn't really matter who you are or who your parents were. We're not dominated by any one company or industry. There's really space for everyone here. So we have a very open ecosystem that's defined by our spirit of inclusion. And then in terms of funding, LA is, of course, home to Silicon Beach. Everyone has their twist on Silicon Valley. Venture capital is continuing to break records every year in California. The lion's share continues to be in California, with San Francisco #1 and LA #4. And so far in 2021, California startups continue to collect the biggest investments. So of the 10 biggest deals, half of them have been in California. So a lot of companies come here because the access to funding is here. And then, as Doug was mentioning, LA is one of the most global cities in the world. The mayor likes to say we're the Western capital of North America, the Northern capital of Latin America, and the Eastern capital of Asia. And we really do see those collisions and the access to all those regions here in LA. We have the 3rd largest diplomatic corps in the world here. So there's access to the diplomatic community from every country. I shouldn't say every country, but many countries. And then we have the largest customs district in the United States, the Port of Los Angeles and the Port of Long Beach. It's been the busiest, most productive container port in the Western Hemisphere for over 20 years. And I see my time is running short, so I'm just going to skip through a couple of these. And
you've got about 45 seconds or so.
Okay. I'll just mention also that the Los Angeles airport is the 3rd busiest airport in the world. So it has 700 daily nonstop flights to 113 destinations in the United States and 46 countries. So it's real. Los Angeles, you know, is a great jumping off point for the rest of the country and the globe if you're doing global business. And, you know, stuff starts here. It really is born here. Whether we're talking about the internet, the first internet message was sent from the UCLA, or the Mars rover was developed here at JPL in Pasadena. And we're the 6th leading startup ecosystem in the world. So really fast moving, fast growing. And I can't forget or can't skip over our quality of life. You know, great weather up and down the state, access to outdoor activities within a 3-hour drive. We have the ocean, the mountains, the desert. Yes, the desert too. And forests. There are 14 national parks within a day's drive from Los Angeles. And we have more museums and theaters than any other US city. We're really undergoing yeah. So maybe I'll stop there. I have a lot more to say, but we can get to it in the Q&A.
Thank you so much. Great information. We're great, if you will, counterpunch to Texas, because they laid some really good blows. Now, boxing may not be the right analogy here, because Barry Broome is a wrestler from way back from Ohio, who I saw, Jenna, your comment about GPEC, Greater Phoenix Economic Council. Barry's was really the one that really got that going. Chris Camacho of GPEC has continued their success and that they've had. But Barry was the one that really got it going successfully, and just so impressive what he did there. And now he's moved on to Sacramento, and he's now waving the flag of California valiantly and expertly and professionally. He's the president and CEO at Greater Sacramento Economic Council. And Barry, without further ado, please let us know your thoughts about California, a global destination, better than Texas or not?
Yeah, well, a couple things. I think one of the mistakes that we make is, competitiveness is being defined by like Site Selection Magazine. And Site Selection Magazine is really a professional network of people that make their living negotiating state incentives. And so we've actually caught, by the way, Site Selection in plenty of errors when they measure California's competitiveness. So competitiveness is really about social progress, equity, wealth, diversity. It's got a much bigger definition. And if you look what our country just went through this last year, if we're not paying attention to social progress, they may not let us have our economy, right? We had dangerous unrest in our downtowns, and of course out in rural America across the US, being Ohio native. And that's because there's not enough social progress. So you can't hollow out the center of it. So, when I came to California, I founded this organization from scratch. So we have 45 CEOs on our board, 20 public officials, about a $5.2 million shop, which is a pretty good shop in the economic development world. And our goal was to turn Sacramento into a more dynamic and diverse economy, because we've sort of not wanted to be San Francisco. So if you look at a city and you see it getting overrun and a lot of people migrate to Sacramento from San Francisco, we had to move towards a vision for Sacramento, but first there's got to be a vision for California. So one of the first times I presented California, I was here about 2 months, and I just got blown out of the water by some Chicago guys, on taxes and regulations. And when I was done, I was like, well, if it's this bad, we wouldn't really have an economy in California. So here's what I found out in my first research on the state of California. California businesses are more productive and more profitable than businesses in any other state in the nation, regardless of sector. We did a 50 sector evaluation. If you sell insurance in Los Angeles, you're going to make more money than if you sell insurance in Dallas. If you're going to own a restaurant in San Francisco, you're probably going to make more money than owning the restaurant in Austin. Certainly, if you sell a downtown piece of real estate in San Francisco, the margins are going to be higher, the fees are going to be higher than you would in another market in Texas or Arizona. So we found that California had intense profitability and intense productivity because it continuously moves forward and recycles the economy. So you got to be in California to get. When Oracle announced they were moving to Austin, here's what California did. That's an old technology. Who cares? Really? So you see that if you're not in California, you think, oh, what a blow. Ellison's leaving, Silicon Valley. In California, it's like, that's been an old technology for 20 years. See you around, and then what you'll look up and find out between the Bay Area and San Jose or in Los Angeles, you'll find there'll be 15 companies all coming up with 300, 400, 500 employees that are getting ready to take Oracle completely out of the market. So California is a story of profitability and productivity, and it's a story of disruption. And so here in our region, we have 3 companies doing an IPO in Sacramento. One is a company called Power School. It's the largest software academic technology company in the United States. And the other company is called Origin Materials, and it's a replacement for carbon-based plastics. So when these companies mature and get downstream and they need to manufacture at $20 an hour, well, they're going to go to Nevada. You're not going to do that in California, because you're going to have talent shortages at 20 an hour. You're going to have, higher than normal rents. But what you're going to do in California is you're going to continually to move towards the front of the economy. So Sacramento, we refer to ourselves as a little redheaded stepchild of California. But 41,000 people and during the pandemic moved from the Bay Area to Sacramento, and their average age, they were under the age of 35 and they're educated. So the people leaving California are 54 to 65, and they're moving to lower costs and are winding down their careers. The people moving to California between the ages of 18 and 34. I mean, we're still the #1 in-migration state for Ivy League graduates. So people only do the story coming out of California. They never do the story of coming into California. And typically in the Bay Area would have 260,000 people leave the state every year prior to COVID, but they'd have 274,000 people come to the state. Now, we did not have a positive net migration, so some people are concerned about that, but I'm not so much. One smart advantage is that both states enjoy is we're pro-immigration. So Texas and California are both pro-immigration, as is Arizona. And of course, the economy comes from people. It doesn't really come from jobs. It comes from people. So I think our heritage as a sanctuary state is very strong for us. And then in Sacramento's case, we're the #3 location for tech workers in the US. Austin's 1, Seattle's 2, Sacramento's 3. And we have the #1 housing market in the US when it comes to sales and growth. So when people talk about migrating out of San Francisco, the #1 location is Sacramento, the #2 location is Los Angeles. So most of the people are staying in the state. And if they're young, they stay in the state. And if they're older, they leave the state. And that's because there's lots better places to retire than California. We don't make a retirement pitch in California. But I think the other thing too on taxes is, people forget too, California does not really have a property tax. We have a very marginal property tax. And so when you're looking at, and we also have a 100% selective sales factor. So believe it or not, California is 25th in the nation in taxes because most industries are tradable sectors and they can write their corporate income down to almost zero. And then our property taxes are almost non-existent. So at the end of the day, we really end up being middle market in the US in taxes. The challenge for us, our difference with our government, we don't want to be pie in the sky, has been the regulatory interference in the labor markets. Those are the legitimate issues, I think, against California's business climate policy. But going back, I watched Wayne Gretzky on the master class, and his dad taught him, go where the puck's going. California, where's the puck's going? All right. So you probably heard of this thing called electric vehicles and being banned in the US by 2035. Don't worry, we've already been in that business for 15 years and we already have our charging stations in. So here in Greater Sacramento, we will have 100% renewable energy in our grid in 7 years. And what people are going to look at that, they're going to see that as kind of a liberal policy, right? But the feds are going to control industry. And if you listen to Google or Bezos or Microsoft, Ford's announced they're not going to make vehicles that aren't electric by 2035. So when California moves down some of these regulatory paths, like the environment, it looks crazy because they're down that path by themselves for 10 or 15 years. But when you lift your head, here's everybody following California's environmental policy. And I really do think the attraction of people is going to come down to social progress and your ability to protect their rights. I worry about states that don't protect people's rights, especially women's rights. And so just as you get a tax break in Texas, you do lose rights when you move to Texas if you're a woman. And I think this is just starting to bubble up. And these are the conversations we've been having with tech employers all the time. Why would you go to a place that doesn't protect your employees' rights? And so here in California, LGBTQ rights have been founded and invented. We're a sanctuary state, women's rights, workers' rights. Now we got to help the government understand business owners need rights too. So we're a little out of balance on that, on a litigation and liability side, but that's a rights argument for us more than a pro-business argument. So
really good points.
Yeah, so if you're looking to buy a cheap house, don't come to LA. We don't have one for you. If you're looking to buy a cheap house, don't come to San Francisco. If you're looking to buy an affordable house, you can come to Sacramento. We're still, top 20 in affordability. But if you're looking to be part of the future, right? If you want to be connected to Asia, if you want to be on the cutting edge, Chris Camacho is a good friend of mine. Obviously, he was a protege of mine and replaced me at Phoenix, and that was by plan. I told him one day, I said, I love Arizona. I still got a house in Arizona. So I may be in that 54, 64 range. I may go back to Arizona because, it's where my friends are and I raised my kids there. But I told Chris, and no shade on Arizona, I told him, I said, this is really important for everybody. There's a cul-de-sac in Palo Alto that's got better engineers than the entire state of Arizona. And that really is true. And what people don't realize is what you learn in California, there's engineers and then there's engineers.
Really good points, Barry. Thank you so much. Let's, I'd like to turn it back over to the Texas side. There's two things, maybe three things that we want to do. I want to ask Nelson and Christopher and the Texas group, you know, what comments do you have to some extent in rebuttal, if you will? And then we have time for a few questions. And I think Cesar is going to have a poll here at the end where you can choose who won, quote unquote, whatever that perspective, whatever that means. So I'd like to turn it back to Texas. What comments do you have in what you heard there today? And I'm guessing, Jenna, you might want to have a comment about Barry's comment, a couple things Barry said there.
I love it. Me up first, Doug. No, this is great. I was actually taking notes on your pitch, and there were some great things. And both of you guys, I was kind of writing down, oh, great point about, you know, the international perspective, productivity measurements. I think all of that is exceptional. I think at the end of the day, the companies are voting, right? And so just like Barry said, there are certain companies that make sense to locate in California, and there are certain clearly that make sense to locate within the state of Texas. And so it's not in my opinion, it's not necessarily a competition, so to speak. It's about making these companies successful. And if we get down to some of what Barry actually mentioned, specifically about people and talent and rights, I mean, that's when you really start thinking about economic mobility and the greater good, not just for each city that we represent or region or state. It's about the country and positioning ourselves. And so I'm just so pleased that we have talented economic developers and government officials across the country that are doing what we do, because that's what's going to move the country forward. That's what's going to move Americans forward. So I'll just close by saying thank you for the opportunity to be here, and great job everybody, including Arizona. I didn't even know Arizona was going to be on this conversation. I was going to be facetious and say, where's Arizona? But no, this has been fun, and thank you so much for the opportunity.
You can't keep a good man down. Thank you, Jenna, or a good woman. Nelson, I think, did you have a question, or did you want to say something?
Just to pick from the attendees' questions, many of the concerns are when relocation happens, what happens to employment? I mean, if one of the questions is very good. It says if the company is coming from California and it brings its employees to Texas, what does Texas wins with that? So if any of you want to comment on that. And also, there were many mentions about the infrastructure in terms of the California connection with Asia, as Barry mentioned. But if any, Mr. Maso or Jenna want to comment about the centrality of Texas, especially the Dallas area and the airports and the connection with the rest of the country and with the rest of the world. That would be...
Nelson, I'll take a shot at this. I mean, Dallas-Fort Worth Airport up in our area, second busiest in the country, right behind Atlanta. And clearly being centrally located, we're a worldwide economy. We're an international economy. I think both California and Texas does that well. And that's the first thing I want to really kind of touch on is, look, we want every state to do well. Me as a principal at Ryan, number one, but two, as former mayor here in Frisco, we're all in the same boat here. We know that we have a lot of international companies coming to the U.S. and we all benefit wherever they go in the U.S. Every family deserves the opportunity to have a job, earn a living, and provide for their family. So that's a win-win for all of us. And I think we can't put each other down when we're working internationally. It's a healthy competition. Each one of us has unique things to offer. But to that first question, Nelson, when Toyota moved their headquarters to Plano, which is right on the border of Frisco, they spent a year-long effort in providing information to their employees, putting GPS in their cars so they could see the local churches and local things of interest to try to get them to move, because human resources was the most important thing to them. Clearly, a good majority did not move. Other partners have jobs in California. They don't want to change that. So they hire a lot locally. So both things happen. You get relocations and you get local hires. It's just the nature of the beast. But I gotta tell you, one of the big things, and I've given a lot of tours for elected officials all over the country to our area, because Frisco is considered a new city, new technology, safest city. We built a system called SAFER, Situational Awareness for Emergency Response. We want every city to copy that. A typical high school in Frisco has over 80 video cameras. We can tell you who a teacher is, where they're located, how to get a hold of them. Every police car, every fire truck has that information. It was designed by us, built by us, and won the worldwide GIS award. It was the best in the world, beat out other countries. So we want to share those ideas first and foremost. And, California is a beautiful state. I love it. We do work out there. Government has to start, and local government or state government, understand that businesses create jobs. They don't know it. My brother-in-law is the retired CEO and chairman of Boeing. He shared with me when they hired 7 employees, this big, huge 100,000 plus employee company, they knew which states and cities were the right fit for those 7 employees. And that's where they put them. And the cities never knew, the state never knew. So the hemorrhaging of jobs is sometimes significant without the local governments knowing. And unfortunately, elected officials, I can say this, I was one, we have to work really hard at thinking 30 and 40 years from now. They're thinking about getting reelected next year. And some of the decisions they make, they should never see. And in Frisco, we really thought about the sustainability. It's easy to build for today. But cities that went bankrupt, like Detroit, went bankrupt 30, 40 years ago. They just didn't know it, right? So I worry about the path California has taken for several reasons. Number one, Texas is definitely a beneficiary. I deal with companies every day talking to us about relocating because of no income tax and the cost of living and the workforce. They want to be part of that. And the reality is California can do the same thing. They have to start thinking about what does a business need to succeed here? Because you know what? They have a choice. If you keep putting burdens on them, they will move. And so when I had that discussion with mayors from Washington and California, we were visiting DC, when I shared the numbers in Frisco, opening 3 schools every year, $2 billion of property growth every year, at the $5 billion mile and 1 mile that was under construction. I said, well, how do you do that? And what I shared with them is, well, here's what you don't do. You don't keep increasing burden on businesses, because put yourself in that CEO's position. You have a choice. You can make a decision where you're most successful. So that's what really Texas has done. They invest in infrastructure. We have the largest producer of wind power in the U.S. is in Texas. There's more miles of roads and rail than any other state, 16 seaports and 380 airports. We invested in the state. We invested in our communities. It took a lot of money, but we had to show that there'll be a return to the taxpayer. And talking about, minority and woman-owned business, we have 1 million woman-owned business in Texas, 1 million, okay? Forbes recently ranked Texas as the #1 for job growth prospects. And that's something my dream in this world is every state looks at the best practices from every other state and use them. We have copied things from California. They've done some amazing, their investment dollars, R&D, they excel at that. They do a really good job at that. But some things you do may counter that. So you have to make sure that you're well balanced in every way. So that's kind of my take on it. We tried, putting my elected official hat on. Obviously, we want to grow jobs. That was our #1 priority, invest in the community. Dallas Cowboys want to move to Frisco and bring everything they have with it, 150 companies. They want $90 million for a new stadium. most elected officials say, well, we don't have that kind of money. We didn't look at it that way. We looked at it, well, how can we make that of value? The high schools get to use it as a professional stadium. The kids are being mentored by the #1 sports team in the world, sports medicine, research, marketing, sales, media. They're alongside that. They come out of high school, it's a step down. That's why our education system is growing like it is. That school district got a 10% from the Cowboys in sponsorships. They get mentoring. They got a $2 million uniform deal. That $90 million investment was nothing over long term compared to the return, and the facilities owned by the taxpayer. They have that value. And the Cowboys put in over $170 million into the facility now that the taxpayer owns. So there are public-private partnerships that can be created. And that's where I think some governments go, lack of a better word, south, like Texas South, right? Some governments really lose sight of together, you can create some pretty cool things instead of really fighting with each other, instead of competing with each other. So anyway, that's
really appreciate that. We only have 2 minutes. We do attempt to finish on time, and particularly today because I told Christine the wrong time, maybe Barry too. So I appreciate, Christine, you reorganizing your very busy schedule so you can adjust to be able to hit this hour instead of the wrong hour that I told you earlier. Because we only have 2 minutes, and because we've heard now from Jenna and Maher as to some extent closing comments, could we just hear maybe 45 seconds each from Barry and Christine, if you don't mind, just in your closing comments, and then we'll shut it down. And just as a final note, I did mention about doing a survey. I think we'll do that, Cesar, offline through the email and get survey through the attendees afterwards. And also, if you have questions that we didn't get to, we'll attempt to answer them offline through the email back and forth. So if you've registered for this program, you'll be in contact with the follow-up information. If you haven't, send us an email to info@globalchamber.org to get into that conversation. Barry, any final thought, 45 seconds?
Yeah, I think, going back to the two states, first off, both states and every state needs to move their policymakers out of populism. So this populist movement is incredibly dangerous for everybody. And so I think that's step one. And so here in California, we've had a big affinity for labor. So we tend to be the test case on labor laws. That's not great for us. Labor is less than 10% of our workforce. They shouldn't have that much influence over our government. The biggest threat that I see coming to California is the deterioration of rights for people that are occurring. And those are the kind of things that when they bite you in the ass, it comes out of nowhere and they don't let go. And you can't necessarily measure that on a balance sheet. But the other thing, both for Arizona, when I was in Arizona, I worked very hard on the renewable energy standard. If you're selling coal and you're selling oil, and that's your primary energy base, you're going to run into a lot of problems economically in the next 5 to 10 years. And those aren't things you can tend to pivot away from very quickly. So I think it's very important, whether it's climate change or rights, probably sound too much like a California, diversity, equity, inclusion. These start off as kind of high-minded ideals, but as you can see now with labor shortages, if you're anti-immigration, you're gonna have a hard time turning the lights on your economy. If you don't embrace diversity and inclusion, you're not gonna have a middle class and you're not gonna have a strong, stable economy. If you don't move towards climate change, you're gonna get caught. I mean, these big tech companies, are under tremendous pressure to meet zero carbon footprint objectives. And they're gonna have a hard time, long time. Google's gonna announce, I think June 1, 18,000 jobs in San Jose. San Jose has 1.4 million average housing price. Google's gonna put 18,000 jobs in San Jose. The bottom line is it still comes down to talent. And then how well does that talent see themselves in your community? Sacramento's the third most diverse region. If you're Asian, if you're Latina, if you're this, if you're that, if you're white, if you're Native American, you see yourself in our community. And I think those are the things that'll be California's strengths and Texas' strengths. But you really got that energy crisis and grid crisis in Texas is going to get bigger if it doesn't get addressed around climate change principles.
Great points. Christine, you have the last word. How would you like to close?
Oh, lots of pressure. I'll just kind of piggyback on what Jenna was saying, which is that I think there's really only competition if you look at this as if there's a closed universe of companies that is finite. And there are so many entrepreneurs and new ideas and new companies that can grow and thrive and be created in our cities if we create the right, and in our states if we create the right environment for it. So I think that, yeah, we can all attract a lot of great companies and yeah, that's it.
Appreciate really 4 amazing experts, I think, as you all saw today. Jenna Saucedo-Herrera, Mayor Maso representing Texas, and then Barry Broome and Christina Peterson, Barry with the Greater Sacramento Economic Council and Christine with City of Los Angeles. Gentlemen, Nelson and Christopher, thank you so much for putting this together, the idea behind it, building the Texas team around this. And I've really appreciated the California side of it, since I'm kind of mostly that these days. And I think both sides made some really great points. So it might, I think I saw a message from Nelson saying, well, maybe we need to do a round 2 here. I think clearly each of you have made some really extraordinary positive points for companies to think about. So the next steps on this is that we're going to put a blog post together. If you have questions and additional things that came out, we'll try to answer those in the blog, and then also through email exchange. We'll have this as a recording that we'll send out as well. And so I think we'll, let's digest what we heard today. We heard a lot of really good information. Let's digest it and decide what the next round is. But ultimately, we have 2 very successful states. Thank goodness you're not New York or West Virginia or someplace else. There's a lot of activity going on here that is very positive. And we heard from Arizona as well, a lot of positive things going on in Arizona and Utah. And there's many states that are accessing technology, that are tapping into what their uniquenesses are. And California and Texas are 2 extraordinary states, and we had 4 extraordinary speakers today. I'd like to close it down. I'm really sorry that we went a little bit over, but I thought the content of what was being delivered, I didn't want to shut it down too prematurely. And so thank you all for speaking, and you all have a good rest of your day. We'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeffrey.
Thank you, guys.
Take care, everyone.
Everybody vote. The survey's online.
Take care, everybody. Thanks,
Thank
Cesar, for running this somewhat complicated event.